You are listening to Invest in the Future by Future Africa. Future Africa is a platform connecting mission driven innovators and investors looking to turn Africa's most difficult challenges into global business opportunities. Please note that the content of this podcast is not to be regarded as investment advice. My name is Olabinjo Adeniran. I'm the growth partner at Future Africa. And today, our guest is Maya Horgan-Famodu, who's the founder and MD at Ingressive Capital. Ingressive Capital is had a $10 million VC fund one, and currently has launched a $50 million fund two, targeting early stage African tech companies. They have invested in companies like Paystack, Tizeti, and 54 Gene. So Maya, how's your day going? Let's get started.
Thank you very much for having me. I am excited to be here and be engaging on this topic. My day is going quite well. I'm in New York City actually, and headed to Minnesota tomorrow, LA after that, and then back to Lagos from there. So a bit of business travel in the meantime, in the making.
Sounds like you're super booked and busy this summer. So I'd like you to just share with our audience what your background is like, and more importantly, how you got into venture capital, and then I will take conversation on from there.
Great. Yeah, happy to. So my general background, I have a very American accent. I realize I grew up in rural Minnesota to a Minnesotan mother and an Ogun Statian father. Went to university in the US, Pomona College, Cornell pre-law program, worked at JP Morgan briefly in New York, then private equity research in Texas, and started my first business, Ingressive Capital Advisory. At 23, I'd originally tried raising a $50 million fund to invest in tech in Africa, but it was before the time, and it was before Africa was cool. And so launched the advisory firm, worked with the who's who of global technology companies and investment funds, assisting them to enter and operate across sub-Saharan Africa, do market research on ground, make their first 5 to 10 investments. And for some, we actually ran their Africa strategy for them. So did that until 2017, then launched Ingressive Capital Fund One with a number of our clients from the advisory business, and have been investing away from Fund One. We just writing the check now for our 34th investment there. And last year we launched Ingressive for Good, which is our Delaware Incorporated 501c3 that's focused on increasing the earning power and employability of African youth. They do university and micro scholarships, technical skills training, and talent placement for African youth. They've trained about 66,000 people so far. Their last training cohort of 3,000 members had about 80% employment day of graduation. They've given out about 5,000 unlimited Coursera accounts, 1,000 scholarships to women to learn product management and design. The list goes on. So they provide a lot of technical talent that then gets scooped up by our portfolio companies and others across Africa. And then last year, we also had our big exit with Paystack. And then this year, we launched the raise for our $50 million second fund. So yeah, that's us.
Absolutely amazing. Just want to take you back a bit there. So while I was preparing for this session, I read your Forbes interview, and there was somewhere you mentioned where in your very first attempt, like you said, at raising a VC fund was in 2014, before African tech was cool, and then you had moved to Lagos to launch your first fund. At that point in time, when there was pretty much no spotlight on the continent, especially for countries like Nigeria. What was at the back of your mind, and what were you thinking at that time?
Yeah, I would say it wasn't a conscious, hey, now's the time people are going to say yes or no. I wasn't really focused on what the capital demand or the placement would be. I was solely focused on the opportunity and increasing the resources for that opportunity. And so, in 2014, when I left sort of corporate America and went out on my own, it was because I couldn't do anything else. I was working in private equity research, assisting investors to come to informed decisions on opportunities like big PE firms in the US. And we'd be talking about infrastructure in the US or hospice care in the US or this, that, and the other. And I'd be like, but what about youth populations in sub-Saharan Africa? Like, let's talk about emerging tech trends across the continent. And I just, when you want something and it's all you can think about and you can't sleep because you're dreaming about, or because you're thinking about it at night and you're writing business plans and you're like, and that was in the initial phases of Andela. I saw the first article of Andela's seed raise and, then Series A. And I just like, was having crazy FOMO. I needed to be on the continent. I need to be in Nigeria with my family and then also working on Ingressive.
That sounds absolutely great. And so your first attempt after this, this fundraise kind of, you were kind of declined by investors. Your first attempt was to kind of bridge, tech folks and investors in the Valley to Nigeria. And I remember that in 2014, you hosted something called a tour of tech. Is that what it was called? I don't remember the name exactly. Yeah, it was called a tour of tech.
Yep.
How did you pull that off, coming from the finance side, now going to have to bring folks from the Valley who are mostly, tech inclined, and convincing them to come to Lagos for the very first time?
Persistence. You don't stop. It took me like 6 months to get a group of 10 top investors. And we had like the CIO of Techstars, Jason Seats, and, guys or people from New Relic and, private investors and, executives across the board that we got to come on and 500 startups to come on that first trip. And the idea was, I guess it took 6 months because of course the initial conversations were like, but what about Boko Haram? Like, what are we going to be like? Will we have bulletproof vehicles and armed guards and all that kind of stuff? And when people actually came to the continent, I was persistently, for some weekly, for some daily, for some checking in on the, going literally door to door, knocking on people's offices. And half of them were really excited about Africa, and the other half were like, this girl's annoying. If I just come to Africa, she'll leave me alone. And so we got the group to come together. And before the trip, people were worried about their safety. And then the day that they arrived in Lagos, and this is 2014, people were like ordering Ubers by themselves to go to lunch with their new friends at this new cafe, blah blah blah. Like, I remember the first day, this one of the guests I was like, okay, so we're gonna have breakfast. She's like, Maya, I'm already booked. I have a new friend, and I'm gonna go see them. I was like, oh, okay, see ya. So the perception versus reality there was such a wide gap in between those two. And I think from an investment perspective as well. And so as investors came, they only had a wildly positive experience because the global perception of Nigeria and opportunities and sort of like ease of doing business and livelihood even was so low and so negative that everyone had these wildly positive experiences consequently. And because it's dope and there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. And that would also, one of the most pivotal events in Nigerian tech. So we have you to thank. We have you to thank for all of the results that we see today. And so from there on, you went to start a fund. You had mentioned earlier that you had seen the opportunity from 2014. And so now you had brought these people to Lagos, and did you just kind of leverage on that network play? Like, okay, so now you've come and you've seen these companies, but they need to survive, right? They need to survive.
Yeah, I think at first it was a combination. Like when I tried originally in 2014, it was like, I was 23 with a year and a half of work experience. I'd never actively done anything in the tech space or on the continent. I hadn't invested in anything, and I was like trying to raise this fund. And so I guess it was logical that people were like, maybe. And by 2017, I had facilitated countless deals, like over 20 deals. Our clients were actively engaged on the continent. We were providing support, post-investment portfolio support. We're basically doing a lot of the steps required to be an investor, like sourcing the deals, supporting diligence on the deals, supporting portfolio support, and providing reports and communications, and then also doing market expansion work. We built out in building out the advisory company, we built a program in every major computer science department in Nigeria and in 7 other African nations, where we had ambassadors, we had technical trainings, we were doing hackathons, we were doing market research. And so we had this massive decentralized network that not only could help us with understanding market opportunities, but also sourcing talent.
That's great. That sounds great. I want to ask a question here about the numbers. How did you decide this was going to be a 10 million fund? And the reason I'm asking is because a ton of the funds that existed at the time were 1 million, 2 million, 3, 5 kind of funds. How did you say, you know what, I'm going to go all out and I'm going to go raise 10 million? Why was that the ballpark figure for you?
Because at 10 million, I was tired. It took me 2 years to raise 10 million. And I was done. No, that was our target because we had broken down our where our target investment ticket ownership would be, the stage in which we were investing, and the number of companies that we needed to invest in to realize that outsized venture capital return, given the failure rate and success rate of a typical VC fund. So a combination of acknowledging the first time fund and sort of testing out the model, acknowledging the time that it would take to raise that much money, and acknowledging the portfolio construction required to produce outside returns to be able to raise a second fund.
Yeah, and there's a lot of founders who are here today. I've seen quite a lot of people introduce themselves as founders. What is your thesis what is Ingressive Capital's thesis for funding African startups?
Yeah, we actually just finalized our thesis yesterday, so I'm glad you asked. Our thesis is, we look at 3 parts. So it's first, we have a methodology of how we assess where we're going to invest. Well, before that even, we have a 30-point due diligence checklist that allows us to invest in an African ecosystem. And within that, we look at 3 things. We look at the last 15 to 20 years of macroeconomic activity, like GDP growth, key contributors to GDP, fastest growth sectors within GDP over the last 15 to 20 years. And then we look at where practically are the liquidity events happening in venture capital. Where is the bulk of money going to in the technology space in Africa? And then we look at, by all of us being on ground across the continent, where are we experiencing the most inefficiencies, and where do we as African consumers ourselves believe that the new market opportunity will exist? And so we invest in the intersection of those 3. That's how we identify the spaces. And what those predominantly are: unsexy infrastructure tech, as well as consumer tech that's benefited by this rapidly growing population, youngest populations in the world, fastest growing economies in the world, fastest growing consumer classes in the world, and highly tech enabled. So those are the 2: infrastructure tech and tech benefiting from this burgeoning youth population.
Absolutely great. Sounds very similar to what our thesis is like. So I think we do have quite a bit of companies that are on both of our portfolios. And so I wanted to ask, what were the very early companies you saw? What was your first check? And what was that experience like, signing the very first check for the very first time to a startup?
Yeah, so before the launch of the fund, I was investing profits from the advisory companies into startups in the ecosystem, and we invested in Tizeti. And when we launched the fund, the very first check that I wrote, it was into Paystack.
So 2 wins, 2 wins follow on. And you've been doing this this is probably your 6th or 7th year now. What are the things you encourage founders to do when they're pitching Ingressive Capital?
Oh my gosh! Wow, you're right. This is my 6th year. Where has the time gone? I'm an old woman now. Where would I just got distracted by how long I've been doing this. It's the better part of a decade. You asked me, what would I encourage founders to do to be successful, or can you repeat the question?
So what would you encourage founders to do when pitching Ingressive Capital? in terms
Okay.
of how their product fits into your thesis.
Yeah. I mean, look at those two sectors that I mentioned that we're investing in. Either it's B2B and sort of infrastructure tech focused on traditional industry, and that could even be like SaaS focused on traditional industry, enterprise, et cetera, or B2C focused on the fast growing youth population. And I would say we invest in, I mean, everything is defined on the website. There's nothing that we're hiding. So one, as genuine and transparent as we are, we obviously expect the same of you. So we're going to be transparent about how we're thinking about the opportunity, about the timelines it takes. On the website, it specifically specifically stipulates what we're looking for. Post-traction businesses, technical founder in-house, you're focused on $1 billion total addressable market, $1 billion plus. You're in one of our key ecosystems, Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, or Egypt. There's a way that the fund can immediately and directly support and scale the business, or like help with the scale of the business. So yeah, there's nothing secret. It's literally all there. So go on the website, fill out an application, and we'd love to have a chat.
And the next question I was going to ask to follow up on that is, what are the red flags you see when you talk to founders or when you go through pitches? What do you see that you're like, this is an absolute no-no?
Yeah. So founders sometimes don't realize that they may be having a conversation with an investor and talking about their deck or talking about something very practical, but every interaction is a data point on the character and the way that the founder responds. And so if I'm having a conversation with you and I give you a piece of advice, and of course, the founder should know the sector best and exactly what's happening, et cetera. But as an investor, we see thousands of decks a year, and we invest in, dozens and then hundreds of companies. And so in that time period, we generally learn some stuff about at least macro trends and sort of maybe some best practices around hiring or those sort of things. And so if I advise a founder on something related to their business and they're immediate to snap back and say, no, that's, I'm never going to do, or they have a sort of emotional response to our feedback, or just shut it down entirely and don't listen, or get very defensive, that's indication that the person is not going to be receptive to to the feedback of their customers. I want to see humility. I want to see a thoughtfulness, a critical analysis, a listening ability, because really building a business is just really listening very well to your target consumer and building a product that they love. And you can only do that by paying attention and being quiet yourself and opening your ears and your eyes. And so that's a one red flag. So don't be defensive, be open. And the second thing I would say is not a misunderstanding of one's own sector, or a complication. If I'm looking at the deck and I don't get it while I'm looking through the general concept, like you have to explain. And also if in your explanation, I know this is a multifaceted red flag, but if in your explanation, I'm looking at your deck, I don't get it myself, and then you're telling me, and then you have multiple parts of the business or all these different ways of monetizing, focus on one monetization solution that will lead to your $1 billion output. Don't give me, and we have to do this, and then we monetize here, and then we're going to build this. That just means, hey, Maya, hey, Ingressive Capital team, I haven't found a large enough total addressable market, so I'm trying to piecemeal different tiny markets together to make it make sense. That's what you're saying. It's like you saying, hey, I haven't hit product market fit, but like, I'm not going to admit that. I'm just going to try to, string together some disparate parts. So like very clear, very cohesive, very concise, a clear problem that's easy to be understood and something that I can relate to. Of course, I'm not an expert in every sector, and I'm not living the lives of people across the continent. But if a problem is presented to us and we talk to the target consumer, or we are the target consumer, and they're like, no, that's actually that's not a real thing. That's a real red flag. So ensuring that's an actual issue of your target demographic.
Yeah, absolutely agree. There we do see some kind of decks where there's too much going on. There's too many not just business output. There's too many business inputs, and it's not clear to us where the revenue is going to come from or what the market, the company is targeting. And for founders who want to build startups, right? They're working in an industry or in a startup right now. How should they measure and find these opportunities that are large enough? Like you said, billion-dollar plus opportunities, right? So how does one who's thinking about building a startup measure these opportunities? Because something that we see often is that there's sometimes an overestimation of what the opportunity is like. It's typically much, much smaller. So how does somebody who wants to build a billion-dollar startup start to think of, okay, this is a big opportunity and this other one is not?
Yeah. So, we're all still trying to figure it out. Relatively, our key sub-Saharan markets, barring South Africa, are relatively opaque, which means that there's not a lot of transparency around the consumer markets. If only a fraction of your consumer base even have proper identification, even 25% or less have proper access to proper banking, are you really going to expect everyone to be online, accounted for, like comprehensively understand your addressable markets? No, it's just not practical. And so like what we do, I can talk about what we've done, which feels and seems to be pretty comprehensive, is you do the macro, the actual, and the perceptive. As in, the macro is like, what are the McKinsey reports and World Bank and these like broad market trends, and like, go online. What is the macroeconomic? What is the GDP? What is the money flowing in these industries at large? You do that coupled with the micro, which is the practical, like going around testing with, say for example, you're in the food and bev industry and you're trying to assess the Lagos market, and saying, going to go talk to target consumers, restaurant owners, et cetera, understanding their key spending or asking for their revenue numbers and getting practical insights from on the ground. And then the second one is your actual experience, your perception. So like from being in this market and your peers or your colleagues or your agents who are doing, market research and across the sector, what are their actual sentiments about this? So I think the combination of those three, and then, or, people call it separately the top-down versus bottom-up approach, gives a pretty comprehensive market analysis. But that's the other red flag. If I see one without the other, there are a lot of things that the company might be missing, or a lot of potential infrastructural challenges that will make executing or realizing that total addressable market very difficult. So it's necessary to consider from both angles.
That was an absolutely perfect and amazing answer. And so
wow, thank you.
Thank you. It was quite deep. It was quite deep. What trends are you seeing these days? What type of startups are you seeing people build? And then following up on that, what startups are you seeing people not build? What industries is Ingressive Capital looking at and saying, look, there should be something that can be solved with hardware or software in this industry?
Yeah, I think there's a huge market opportunity in women's health and wellness, whether it be sexual health or just practical health, and even savings. Like I'm not seeing, why do I not know a piggy vest that's targeted at women or a saving solution when we know there's infinite historical data? Banks all say this, as well as individual lenders. Who are the best people to lend to? Who have the strongest or who have the lowest default rate? Women and women businesses. And why aren't there any company? Like literally, this is a market opportunity that's de-risked, and that data, like practical data, validates time and time again. I would love to invest in a solution that's providing loans and financial literacy training for women and female-founded SMEs. I think that's a massive, like that's half the continent is female, and half and then within those populations, it's seen time and again there are lower default rates. So that's something that's interesting that I just haven't seen, and I don't really understand why. The other one is in the automotive space. So it's super unsexy, but every time I try to bring my car to the mechanic and I have to verify and vet, are these parts real? Are these parts not real? I want to see more in simply like, is this Tacumbo or is this like?
Yeah, and I want something.
Yes, I want to just is the guy legit? Is he going to be stealing things from my under the hood? I don't know. So I want something that verifies and validates in the automotive space, and tracks like sort of the RX type solutions that are tracking pharmaceutical verification solutions. I want to see that, but in the automotive space. Similarly, I think there's a lot of opportunities for cold storage and in the agriculture value chain at large, logistics, whether that be international or domestic. I think there's massive and major opportunities there. And financial services, there's still like the remittance solutions are cute and interesting. Do I think we've solved? No. And on that, insurance as well. And lastly, I would say telecommunications and internet solutions at large. We still haven't figured out the internet solution, the low cost data for the masses across the continent. And that is a $1 trillion opportunity. And so solutions around that. And then I think people are going to be paying a lot more attention to data and opportunities in the either tracking information about people, verification around people, and also being able to glean insights about information collected on individuals, whether at a healthcare level, like the 54 genes and like synthesizing the African genome, things like that, or literally for consumer focused businesses, like assessing a market. I think there's still opportunity to find solutions that make sense at scale.
Thank you so much. Interesting that you mentioned financial services for women, because data clearly shows that like it's an underserved market and there's not enough apps or even brick and mortar businesses focused on women financial literacy and credits. And so if you're building something like that, you should probably reach out to Maya and reach out to us as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also know that you talked about the infrastructure, technology infrastructure in terms of the internet. And the question we keep asking ourselves is who's going to do Reliance Geo, who's going to do Reliance
absolutely.
Geo? Somebody needs to do that,
yes.
right?
Yes.
Data is still so expensive and so terrible. And we're hoping that there's a group of people who are trying to solve that problem and will make it better. So what's an ideal team, an ideal founding team that gets funded by Ingressive Capital? What do you expect from founders, seeing that you're at the early stage, you're basically investing in this group of people, and you're hoping that they're the best to tackle and solve this problem?
Yeah, I would say the ideal founding team has their stuff together. They have a technical person in-house, and they have somebody who deeply, deeply understands the target consumer, probably a business person or an operator or product person. And they're focused on a big market. They have traction. So they have people who love their product, who are using their product regularly. Like they have their core of target users. They're also focused on they're Pan-Africans. They're not exclusively focused on one market, though they may have initially launched in just one market. They're looking to expand across the continent, and the problem is the same, or a basic iteration of it is the same in other markets. Also, it's not wildly exposed to the crazy regulatory volatility that we've been experiencing as of recent. So if you're in the telecommunications or the transportation, the like mobility or the financial services space, you're shielded, either working, like you have either some relationship with a big incumbent, or you are, for whatever reason, how you're operating is not exposed to the volatility and the whims of whatever regulator has woken up deciding to do tomorrow. And I would say it's very clear how we can help them. We need the relationships to be mutually beneficial. We need to be able to help the founders. We're not looking to be dumb money and just put in money and walk away. We really, really want to add value. And so coming in and being like, hey, I need access to these sort of investors. I'm going to be raising a Series A. I need Ingressive to help structure it and put it to, or help lead a syndicate into it, something like that. Or, hey, we're looking for biz dev connections in XYZ markets. So things along those lines.
Yeah. So founders, that's how Ingressive Capital can help you out if you're looking for funding. Then what kind of teams do you turn away? What team structures do you say are like, this is definitely not going to work out if you're trying to build a technology company?
Yeah, I can't say sort of across the board there's something that we, say that doesn't work out. I'd say like we invest in sole founders, we invest in multi-founders. I think structurally, if the entity is like, oh, here's something we'd walk away from, is if you're a seed founder, because we invest in the pre-seed and seed, and you've already given away a majority of your business. You've done a bad deal and you own 20% of your company and you're raising 500K at a, 3 mil valuation. We'd probably have a hard time investing in that unless there was a restructure that was possible. We really it's important to us to see the founders maintain majority ownership and stay, incentivized by having control of their businesses, at least up until Series A. And so we would be majorly concerned if that were not the case.
Yeah, I absolutely get that. And so far, are there any startups that you did not back in the early days or even just recently, and you look back and you're like, we should have invested in that startup? Anything like that?
There are a couple. I mean, we had reasons. So we're constantly iterating, like every year and sometimes every quarter. Every year we audit our thesis, and every quarter we review the companies that we decided not to invest in, just to make sure that our investment process makes sense and that we're making the right sort of decisions for the right reasons. So I would say there are a number of startups that we did not invest in and that are performing exceptionally well. There was rationale behind that, was sound rationale as to why we didn't invest into any of those businesses. And I'd say over time, it was really important to us to see all the ducks in the row as far as legal structure at the beginning, like before, and we've missed out on a few great opportunities because we were like, this is weird. Like your structure is weird. Go figure it out and come back. And had we taken the chance to just be like, we'll work with you on it. There are a few companies we would have invested in. And then also seeing the grandiose valuations of mainly fintechs across Africa. There were a couple fights that we had in the very, very early stage about valuation, like what is a 4.5 versus a 5 million valuation when they're raising Series B at 500 million or something. So those sort of being more flexible in entry valuations and being more flexible to work with the founder in some of the like hairy, scary goosebumps that they're sort of getting rid of as they go from infancy to scale.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your investment thesis and how Ingressive Capital measures startups. We already have some questions from the audience, but we will take them in about 3 minutes. I have some interesting questions to ask you. And the first is, what are 3 Nigerian tech products that you can't live without? Apps, just 3 Nigerian
Bamboo.
One.
54 Gene. Anytime I am sick or need help with diagnostics or anything along those lines. And interesting. What else do I use on the day-to-day? Definitely Bamboo. And actually, I do use PiggyVest.
That's absolutely awesome. So that's three apps, and 2 of them are savings and investing apps. So I mean, I think that's pretty obvious. Pretty obvious that you have more savings and investment apps. What songs energize you when you're feeling down or demotivated? What songs do you like to listen to, or what artists do you like to listen to?
I appreciate Burna Boy, Fela, King Sunny Ade. Anything King Sunny Ade. His like, and there's a few Malian artists that I really appreciate. Also Rhye, RHYE. And yeah, I would say Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion as well. Dope.
Sounds absolutely dope. So now we're going to take questions from the audience. If you have a question, please just type it in the Q&A box. So we'll start from the top. We have a question from Atinuke, and she says, why did you choose Paystack to invest in? What variables did you look at?
Yeah, well, I've mentioned at length this thing about humility and integrity of the founders, and like how are like being acute, listening well, demonstrating in however they have, in whatever ways that they are a great listener, and thus they can hear their customer or their consumer and provide solutions directly and immediately catered to those consumers. So yeah, I would say that Ezra and Shola are incredibly brilliant. I love Rai. Yay. Yeah, Shola and Ezra are incredibly brilliant. They're humble people. They listen very well. They focus on building. They have experience on the continent, and they are international standard as far as when it comes to technical talent. I would say they were focused on a major problem that was practical and that people had. When launching their or like when there was ever any like Twitter beef, I actually pay, like, part of our diligence is Twitter beef. Like go on to the social platforms, search their name, and like when people talk crap about the business, do they have customers, like random people, not their friends though, but like random people from the world who come in and come to their defense? Do they have those dedicated, those like warrior customers? And those are the type of that's what we look out for. Like, are people passionate about this product? Yeah, they had strong co-investors that came alongside us, that, like Olumide, who came before us, and some who came after us, Tencent, Stripe, etc. So yeah, they had strong investors. It was it just was generally a golden child from day one.
Yeah. So the next question is from Alexandra, and Alexandra would like you to discuss more about the initial funding for your Fund 1, in terms of what type of investors make up the LPs in that structure. Are they DFIs, HNIs? Are they US based? Are they local investors in that fund? And how long did it take to close, from fundraising to close?
Oh, it took me 30 months almost. It took me too long.
Did you say 30
I know.
months? What?
Yeah. Now you have, look at your life. So you're raising now when when we've all been doing this slugging along since 2000. No, if I were being real, it took me like 5 years, because basically I started the advisory company to build up credibility to be able to launch a fund. So I've been hustling, I've been suffering, just so we can all come and enjoy in this 2021. Our original investors were HNIs, and individuals, and some organizations that were our customers from the advisory company. And then we got a sovereign entity, fund of funds, institutional capital from the US, then multifamily offices. We do not have any DFI investors, or any of the really long, those investors that take 6 to 12 months. I'll leave those to you guys.
Yeah, I don't think we have them either. So the next question is actually kind of like a follow-up from Mohammed. Okay, and so Mohammed says, did you find yourself having different pitch styles when you were pitching Western and American LPs versus pitching, African or Nigerian LPs? That's the first part.
Yeah, I tried raising from Nigerian investors first, and people are like, I spoke to some big boys in traditional industry, and I was like, fund returns 5x. Like, what do you think? I know it's conservative, but get ready for some growth. And they're like, Maya, do you know what I make in 1 week in rice or in, cassava? I'm like, okay, word. Yeah, never mind then. But now with the devaluation, depreciation, people are like, what were you saying again about returns in dollars? Yeah. But I would say it required us to originally have strong name brand American investors, like the Michael from YC and, have like YC guys, WTI guys, Founder Group guys, like, very notable and respected investors from the Western world, Techstars guys. And then from there, that transitioned into us being able to go and name drop to the continent and then being like, okay, this is, legit. And then also I was investing along the way, like the whole 2 years of fundraising, I was deploying capital. So by the time the last investors came in, after 2 years, 2.5 years, I had deals that were meaningfully marked up. By the time we were coming to the end of fundraising.
That short time.
So it's like you put in your money on day one, it's already a 3x. So the conversation became a lot easier at the end of the fund.
And Mohammed's follow-up question is, how did you get the NSIA to be involved in your fund?
It was a long, many-year conversation. And persistence, patience, and just executing and building a portfolio.
So that's your answer, Mohammed. The answer is to not stop asking. And there's a question here from an anonymous person who says, do you invest in competing startups? Like, would you invest in 2 startups trying to solve the same problem?
No, we don't invest in competitors. It's very important to us that our founders can talk to us privately about their issues and be open and honest with us, and like that they can come to us when they have whatever's going on, whether it's in their personal life, it's their professional life, whatever the issue is. They need to be able to see us as an ally. Like, we're not the big tough investors that you have to put on a suit and come present to. Like, our founders come to my house. I go to their house. We sit down with family, and you can't have that type of relationship, and you can't build that type of trust, and you also can't provide unlimited access to your Rolodex if you have competing players. The founders are not going to trust you. So no, we don't do competing investments.
Interesting. Thank you for that answer. We have a question. Someone says there's a large turnover of financial services startups, and isn't that particular industry getting choked?
There's a large turnover of financial technology startups.
In terms of there's a lot of fintech startups, and isn't that industry getting particular?
Yeah, that doesn't mean that they're all solving the right problems. I mean, there's a lot of people doing a lot of things, but yeah, there's a lot of infrastructure problems that have not been solved. Even from a technology solution, like, how many times does your banking app fail when how regularly does your banking app fail when you open up the solution and you try to make a transaction? Maybe your bank is better than my own, but the problems that I have, maybe every 4th time that I go into the banking app, I try to make a transaction, something fails. That's an infrastructure problem that has not been solved. Or the reversals. How many times you go to pay with the POS and there's a reversal on the transaction, or there's, some sort of issue, you have to put in your PIN again. That's an infrastructural issue. Or how many times do you try to accept money from your uncle in Houston, and he has to pay half the amount, or has to send it to this other person to bring it to you as cash, So there are a lot of inefficiencies. Like, think of the practical issues that you have trying to accept money or send money, either from people locally or internationally. Those alone, or maybe you have your life is solved, but my own life is not solved. So there's a lot of infrastructural issues that we still have yet to resolve. That people might be building fluff. I mean, I'm not saying everyone is. There's a lot of very, very practical, very amazing businesses, but I think the oversaturation, a lot of it will, get some users and then die. But we still have major issues to focus on.
And it's interesting that you mentioned the problems you mentioned today. I actually faced all of them. My banking app was down. I'm trying to get money for my sister. Someone's trying to send her money from England. We can't find a way to get the money. And and it's like, okay, we obviously still have so long to go in terms of financial technology. So long to go. There's a ton of questions about the fund, which is interesting. I don't think we've ever seen people have this much interest in how the fund works. And we have a question from Lynn Wesonga. I hope I got your name right. And she says, in the creation of the fund, how did you go about packaging your fund structure and vision for LPs? What stood out for those LPs, and what do you think appealed to them?
Yeah, fund structure and vision. I mean, we kept everything super vanilla. We're Delaware Incorporated LLC LP. Typical management fees, typical carry, nothing out of the box. So I'd say if you're doing the Africa thing, keep as many things as possible industry standard and work with reputable professional services, like household names. Like Oric is our legal firm. Cornerstone's our fund administrator. Like work with, or like the Cartas of the world, work with known reputable professional services, because they're also highly experienced and can make your life a lot easier as far as structurally. You're not, when you're starting your first fund or you're starting your first few funds, you're not supposed to know the best, subdoc terminology to use, or you're not supposed to know, the best structure for the capital calls for your LP base. These are things that should be referred to you by your professional services supports. You're supposed to find the deals, invest in the deals, support the deals, but even reporting on that financial information, you're supposed to have very experienced fund administrators and like financial service supports and tax people who should be able to collect this information, create it, or make comprehensive reports, and then share that with your LP base, and then assist you in the tax and reporting side of things. So like work with great people, do a vanilla structure.
I hope that was sufficient for you, Lane. Okay, we have another question here that's about fintech from Emeka, and Emeka says, why do you think fintech attracts more investment in Africa than health, technology, or other industry players?
Because I think fintech is like a core requisite of allowing for monetization of those other sectors. Like, great, develop health tech, but like, how are you going to do payments for health tech? And then also, how are you going to do tracking? I think there's the natural evolution of a technology ecosystem, and it kind of goes with like chicken and egg. Once you have the telecommunications infrastructure laid, and people have access to phones, what makes that distribution of phones and mobile data available is being able to pay for it, and particularly phone data, being able to pay for it online. And so the financial services in the banking sector are requisite parts. They go hand in hand to even bringing people online, like the first version of technology, which is allowing people to have data and be using the internet. And so all the solutions from there always have a monetization component, or they don't make sense. So,
yep.
Yeah.
So we like to think of fintech as rails in the digital economy, and that's a great way to think about it. Amir Abdul wants to know if Ingressive has a Scout program. I guess it has some.
We do.
To show you.
Yep.
Okay, so look that up, Amir. Okay, there's another question here that says, what was the tipping point that got you into the VC door? At what point were you like, I'm going to be a VC?
Well, those were two different things. The thing that got me interested in VC was understanding its ability to, I was searching for the most effective way to support brilliant people and doing the things they want to do. I grew up super poor with and faced constantly, hey mom, can I get this science set? No, we can't afford it. Hey mom, can I do this extracurricular? No, we don't have enough money. It was like a prison. And my sort of passion, my heartfelt motivation came from, I don't want other people to experience that. I know what it's like to be really smart, but just like be unable to do anything because you don't have the money. But the practical side of that was, and of course, understanding the opportunity on the continent, like, Africa is now, like it's now. And coupling that with the practical side, and yeah, I'd say that generally comprehensively.
Thank you for that answer. Hope wants to know how early Ingressive Capital invests.
Yeah, happy to. And then to finish that answer, the practical side, in case anyone didn't know the stories, I just wanted to be an analyst at a VC fund, and I got, like, you should be an admin, like, or you're really good at planning events, you should be an event coordinator, like, why are you not married? Go find husbands, those were the real answers. And so I was like, okay, if y'all don't want to hire me, I'm just gonna do this myself. And then we're raising bigger funds than most people who wouldn't give me a job. So life goes on. And yeah. I just got distracted. What was your next question?
So the next question, that was a good follow-up anyways. The next question is, how early does Ingressive Capital invest in startups?
Post traction. I mean, 60% of our companies are valued at or under 2.5 million when we initially invest. So we're really, really early. But within that, you got to have traction. You can't, we don't do those paper napkin ideas. There's other people who do them. We are not one. So come with traction in hand. It doesn't have to be crazy numbers, but you have to have recurring sales. You have to have users that are engaged on your platform. You have to have like people who will go up to bat and talk about your product and how much they love it.
That's absolutely right. I have a question here from Seka Adon, and Seka says, how will Fund 2 differ from Fund 1 in terms of investment strategy and the overall fund's direction? It seems like there's tons of people here who want to be VCs. I have my eyes on you guys.
So start. We need people in the ecosystem. And also Ingressive Capital is hiring. And because I didn't have a traditional finance background, I studied environmental policy and English at university. You don't need a traditional finance background to be an effective VC. You need to be passionate about Africa, have practical on-ground experience, love to critically analyze and do market research. If you're of that background, we're hiring a lot of different roles. So for those who are thinking about VC and don't necessarily want to start their own, but would like to have some money to invest, we're hiring.
Please go check out Ingressive social media pages for info on that. So how will Fund 2 differ from Fund 1 in terms of your strategy and the overall company's fund's direction?
Not really different, to be honest with you. We're still writing $200,000 to $400,000 checks in second fund. This one will just have more capital for follow-on investments. So we'll do slightly more deals, about 10% more deals. But within that, we'll just have in-house capital to maintain our pro rata for at least around longer. That
so I hope that clears what's his name's now, Seka's question. Someone says, what VC do you compete with for deals in Africa that you most respect and why?
I'd say we don't compete for deals. We get into deals that we pitch for because of, if not directly, eventually, because persistence, stay committed and add value. Just focus on, if the founder's like, no, we're oversubscribed, or no, we're not interested. Just be helpful, stay very close to them. Eventually they'll be like, okay, this person, this makes sense. We're humble ourselves. So like, we don't need to be the coolest kid on the block. But to practically, I don't think that the ecosystem is developed enough for us to be competing over deals. I think that it still takes a village to raise an African startup. And so there are people that we co-invest with that I see on cap tables pretty regularly, but I would say that there's not, and I don't think I think our ecosystem is still very collaborative, and I wouldn't advise, because it's a small ecosystem and there are a couple numbers of us and we all have to help each other. And so as far as like cutting people out of deals or, like fighting over deals, things like that, it's not something that we do.
Yeah. Daniel, I hope that was a good answer. Someone asks if you invest in pre-product startups. You already said no. So there needs to be products, there needs to be traction, especially. So I think that answers that person's question. Another question is about, what's your take on signing a safe as an angel this person is an angel investor. So this angel investor is asking, what's your take on signing a safe and how do you negotiate equity and valuation at the same time? Tons of people here are investors. Like I think this is absolutely questions coming out of this session. So what's your take on signing safe and how do you negotiate equity and valuation at the same time for a safe?
So one, we don't negotiate equity. We just determine a valuation and the amount that we're going to invest, which, I mean, consequently is an equity conversation, but we're talking about ticket size, and that's, we're in it to help the founder. And so they know the money that they need to raise to get to their next major milestone. And so We invest and try to bring in, if we bring in other co-investors, we try to bring in people that can immediately add value to their business, either supporting business development, or they have regulatory connections, or they can, anchor the next round, et cetera, or lead the next round. So we just try to be intentional and supportive for our portfolio companies. So that's question one. Yeah, I guess I'll leave it there.
I think you answered both questions, actually. You answered both questions appropriately. And so there's a question from Elijah here, and Elijah says, I would like to help entrepreneurs build real-life solutions like you're doing. With no experience, what's my best way into the world of VC as a Nigerian living in Nigeria?
My best way into VC, get operational experience. I mean, I'd say work at a startup, or just go work at a VC. Everyone's like, we're always hiring interns. We recruit interns from Babcock, from different universities across the continent. We recruit them from business schools in the US. We always have a couple interns that are cycling through, and typically they stay on as permanent talent. We have people that served their NYSC with us 4+ years ago and are still talent on the team today. So I'd say go offer your services there are a lot of us on the ground. Figure out your unique positioning. I'd say to get noticed, aside from just reaching it, like my DMs on Instagram are totally accessible. I respond to 100% of the people who message me. I respond myself, like it's actually me. The other platforms like LinkedIn and that, I don't know, maybe it's me, maybe it's someone else, I can help you. But Instagram is 100% me. And Twitter, become a subject matter expert on Twitter. Have a topic that you consistently tweet about, and you'll get noticed, not only by local investors, not only by local talent, but also internationally. Like even my team members now, I'm like, how do you have that connection? I don't have that connection. And he hasn't left Nigeria, and he's like, because I tweeted, I was tweeting thoughtful things and people noticed it. And now I'm getting a lot of, inbound requests due to the content that I'm sharing. That's like, you don't need a passport anymore. You just need a Twitter. So that, and then to go back to the last question about structure. So yeah, thinking about the founder, the ticket size, what they need to raise in order to get to their next milestones, but be very thoughtful in the equity conversation. You want the founder to have majority ownership, ideally up to Series B, so at least to Series A. So that means when you're thinking about, they need to raise a pre-seed, a seed, a post-seed, Series A, Series B, Series D is where or Series C is where they're going to sell, or whatever, however you target it. Make it real practical assessing, okay, as we grow this much, like build out a financial model. They're unsexy and not going to be, 100% accurate. They're probably not going to be accurate. The company could even pivot, but make sure that you and the company make sure the company has an accurate idea of the costs, the expenses associated with building what they want to build. If they want to reach, 500,000 customers, 10 million customers, how many customer support engineers, executive talent do they need to have to support that scale? What sort of, additional services, cloud store, like people don't account for how expensive cloud storage is. Like consider all these things, work backwards, think of how much they need to raise to get to their next major milestone, and be on their side on the ownership conversation. Do not great. You can negotiate your way to owning 20-30% of a pre-seed company. Good for you, clap for yourself. And then when that company gets to Series A and they own 20% of that business and they can't get an investor and they die, that's on you. So cool, you can push and get companies to do things that are not in their best long-term interest, so you get more ownership, but it's going to screw them over in the long term. So make sure that you're thinking that long-term perspective, and also stick with the safe. It's not worth, if you're writing an angel check of 20,000, 50,000, even 100,000, and you have to go negotiate a term sheet back and forth no, we don't have time for that. Just write a safe. It's super standard, quick document, doesn't require any back and forth. You're trying to move quick. And that's really the name of the game. The competitive advantage these days is being able to move fast.
Yeah, absolutely agree with your takes on ownership and allowing founders lead that conversation. We have a question from Atinuke, and Atinuke says, how did you overcome discrimination as a woman in the tech and in the VC industry?
Look at every major VC fund in Nigeria. The largest So we're the largest first-time tech fund raised by an African VC or by an African GP. I'm the youngest VC in history to be raised in Nigeria, and blah, 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 all that other kind of stuff. The largest first-time tech fund of any sole GP in the world. And look at every VC in Nigeria. There's a woman leader, decision maker, if not co-founder, in like all of them. Greenhouse, Alethea, like even Microtraction, like the vast majority. It's not a minority. The majority. My peers are women.
Even Future Africa.
Exactly. There's women. Is come on. And if you look at the like who was just elected the CEO and MD of like majority of the major banks, FCMB, GT Bank, Fidelity, blah, 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 all of them have women. And so this conversation of like being left out, and I mean, I realize that people do practice bad business and that people still do have their own sort of isms that they're working on, but there are like they're going to be left behind. Don't work with those people. You don't have to force yourself to take money from somebody who's racist, ageist. Like I started this out as I mentioned, I tried to launch my first fund. I started my first business at 23. You can imagine this Oyinbo coming into Nigeria with the American accent. Yes, I have green passport, but like, and I'm coming in trying to like talk to big boys. Like, it was hard then, but like the people who are not with it now, after all of the success that we as women and as young people in the tech community have had in general, those people are still stuck and they're like, who knows? She can't do it because she's blah, 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 blah. Don't work with them. They're going to be dinosaurs. The world will outrun them very quickly. And so come to me. I'm happy to refer you to resources. I'm happy to refer you to platforms, but go to the VC industry. That's not the stuff that we're working with. We're not this sexist old boys club type thing. It's not interesting.
Yes, Atinuke, I hope that was sufficient for you. That was a really great answer. We have a question from Emeka. So we're going to close this at 6:05. So I'll just take 2 more questions.
And actually, wait. I want to add one more thing. If you do, if there's for whatever reason, you do have to deal with one of these isms, which you shouldn't and you don't. And I want that to be very clear. There are other people. Think about that. There's billions of people in this world. You don't have to deal with this person. But if for whatever reason you feel like you do, at the very beginning, I had suits, gray hair, and gray-haired men who didn't talk. Sometimes I bring my dad into the room and be like, oh yeah, he's the chairman, he's the boss. Don't worry, I'm just the assistant. And it's like, at the end of the day, the check's coming into my account. So you can think whatever you need to think, I'm still getting the money. I still control the business. And so like, sometimes we have to have our gray hair. Sometimes we have to have our suits, but you better be, if you do have to do that for whatever reason, you better be the one collecting the checks and you better be the one who owns the business that benefits from those gray hairs sitting in front.
Okay, that seems like a very big lesson for you. So I said I was taking 2 more questions before we close this call. The first question is from Godfrey, and Godfrey says, what sector does Ingressive Capital invest in mostly? So what's like the largest portion of your?
Majority is financial services, then it comes SaaS, marketplace, then we do some health tech, agri-tech, and mobility.
So Godfrey, there you go. So financial services, SaaS, agri-tech, healthcare, and mobility. Emeka says, what is Ingressive's unfair advantage? That's going to be the final question for today. That's a really deep question.
Yep. 80% of our limited partners run later stage investment vehicles. So we can give our companies direct and immediate access to follow-on investors. Also, the other remaining 20% run industries across Africa. So as far as our exposure to those who can go from 0 to 1 million customers, blah, 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 like facilitate rapid and radical growth, we have those relationships in-house. And now, given who our exited founders are, given the scale of our companies, and given the sector expertise of our own limited partners, we have expertise in-house. And the very last thing, Ingressive for Good, our nonprofit, ingressive.org. Google it, check it out. You need a laptop, you want a computer science scholarship, we're funding people's dreams. And so that pipeline of talent that's coming out, we can snatch up and put to our portfolio companies. And so hiring, technical talent support.
Thank you so much, Maya. I absolutely had a very exciting and wonderful conversation with you today. And I learned a lot about just like, life and being persistent generally. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for listening to that Invest in the Future episode. Please follow us on social media. Our handle is @AnAfricanFuture on all platforms.
You can join Future Africa to co-invest in these innovators who are turning Africa's biggest challenges into global business opportunities by joining the Future Africa Collective, our exclusive community of co-investors. Please find more information and apply at future.africa/collective. Thank you for listening once again.